What are the top staple Yu-Gi-Oh cards this format? Big dogs, hand traps, and board raiders are an incredibly important part of your Yu-Gi-Oh career, or whatever we're gonna call it. And today I'm gonna be giving you the lowdown on what are the best cards to be able to use inside of your arsenal to be able to stop the top meta Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. Ironically, some people think they got it figured out, but this is gonna reveal all. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. I actually enjoy doing these types of tier lists, even if they don't get as many views as my other tier lists, because they help you, the Yu-Gi-Oh player, all the way down from a local level, playing against your friends and stuff, to the players that are aspiring to be YCS champions. So if the staple tier list is something that helps you guys out, all I ask from you is to like the video, share with a friend, and leave a comment down below in the comment section about what other tier list should we do next. And make sure you do it fast, because Squamata's watching. Now, as per usual, I like to break this video down into two separate tier lists and into different categories, and this helps you guys figure out which cards are most impactful and which cards are the go-to play as opposed to none. So if you're looking for a particular part, I actually added chapters. Right now in Yu-Gi-Oh, statistically, the best strategies in the game are Ryziel, Malice, Fiendsmith Yubel, didn't know that that would be a thing, Tenpai Dragon, and of course, regular Fiendsmith, whether it's Cash Tiro or a ton of hand traps. This particular tier list is going to be sculpted not only statistically, but also addressing what these cards do against those top Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. Let's go ahead and start off with the effect negators. Infinite Impermanence is a must play. While both Effect Veiler and Ghost Mourner are a solid choice, and Herald of Orange Light is technically a must play, but I'm gonna put it in solid choice. Now, Effect Negation is in a really interesting spot right now. They may not have changed the ranking since our last Staples tier list, but your thought process behind them needs to change. The reason why is because decks like Ryziel and Malice can make your Effect Negation cards look stupid. Against Malice, players will often set one card face down if they can before starting off with the Malice play. If you decide to fall for the bait and use cards like Effect Veiler or Infinite Impermanence against a Malice monster, and they just so happen to have one of their 3 trap cards that they can activate, you may wind up having your Effect Negation card missing the target and them still being able to pop off. And against Ryziel, it also is pretty tricky. These cards are often used to be able to stop Ryziel dual drive, but if the opponent has Ryziel cross on the field, they can easily play through these, and oftentimes your opponent can even wind up doing the Fiendsmith combo, making these cards a little worse. Now, if you want to know more about how to beat both Malice and Ryziel, as well as Ryuji, I just so happen to have a meta counter guide giving you details on how to stop these Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. I'll also be dropping some more hints that you need to know in this video, some stuff that I just figured out, so stay tuned. The Effect Negation cards are in a really risky spot. I think the only one that's worthy of playing is Infinite Impermanence because it's so good at going first and going second. Now, Herald of Orange Light may not have those type of problems, but the unfortunate thing about Herald of Orange Light is that you need to be playing a fairy deck or something that plays enough fairies to support it. A really subtle thing that happened on the last ban list is that Eva just so happened to be moved down, meaning that we can play more copies of the card, but so far statistically it hasn't came into fruition. Moving on, we do have a huge shift in our high impact hand traps. These are the cards that are designed to either end your opponent's turn right then and there, or put your opponent in a really risky position. These cards are Droll, Shifter, both the Charmies, Nib, and of course, your boy Spooky Dogwood. Off the bat, I think both Droll and Dimension Shifter are side-worthy Yu-Gi-Oh cards. The weird thing about both Droll and Shifter is that usually at least one of these cards are in must-play, but I think Yu-Gi-Oh is a lot different. While I do think that both Droll and Shifter are still incredibly powerful and are really good at shutting down opponents' turns, the problem with both of these cards is that they're not strong enough against some of the best matchups in the game. Yes, Droll can be a turn ender at the correct times, but consistently it does have its faults, especially if you're going against a pure Ryziel deck or Malice. And Dimension Shifter is more or less the same. Now, with 3 of the 5 decks consistently being able to dodge Shifter, one benefiting from Shifter, as well as their variants against Droll and Lockbird, I think it's best to place these cards in the sideboard. With both the Charmies, Molcharmy Farwellus is a solid choice, Perulia is sideworthy, Nibiru the Primal Being is a must-play, and Ghost Sister is sideworthy. Really interesting to see where these cards line up in comparison to the last tier list. Nibiru the Primal Being is a game-ending Yu-Gi-Oh card and probably should be played in your deck. With so many strategies playing Kashtira and Fiendsmith, even in the strategies that weren't originally weak to Nibiru now summon enough times for this card to be impactful. I think, ironically, the Molcharmy cards are solid but not necessary. Statistically, we've seen a ton of Yu-Gi-Oh strategies have success without the Charmy cards. I'm not saying if you have access to them, you shouldn't consider them. You actually should strongly consider them. But for the players that can't afford the Molcharmy cards and are waiting for the reprints that are happening in 2025, holding off on them is not a bad idea. Next in the hand trap department are the power hand traps. These cards are really good in certain spots. I would say that Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is still a must play. And a nice little tidbit about Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is that against Malice, you should be using it on White Binder's effect to be able to summon itself back to the side of the field because it includes drawing a card in that effect. That leaves it banished and prevents them from going into the plays that they want to go into. Dominus Purge and Impulse could be used the same, but there are some flaws about both of these cards that make you wonder. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, I would say, is pretty much in the must-play category, and you're probably wondering why these cards are where they're at. Well, it's pretty simple. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is heralded as one of the best hand traps in the game. Oftentimes, if it's not the #1 hand trap, it's #2. So there really isn't much to talk about there. The Dominus cards are also really strong, but there comes an asterisk next to it. I think that the Dominus cards were very well designed. We're currently in a Yu-Gi-Oh format where players are playing upwards to 23 hand traps. And typically in those particular formats, you can't play the Dominus cards because they restrict you from so many hand traps in the game. That's the only thing that separates both the Dominus cards from being must-play Yu-Gi-Oh cards is because the deck building that comes to it and the risk versus the reward. Plus, there's really powerful must-play light and fire hand traps in the game. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit has exceeded the negation cards because it's actually a card that gets rid of things. Being able to use it on cards like Ryzeo Dual Drive and Detonator to actually get rid of the threat is crazy good. And doubling back to Malice, using it to be able to get rid of their Link monsters can put you in a position to be able to win. Ghost Ogre is also really good against Fiendsmith Desiree from getting it off the field. There's just way too many situations where this card comes up as one of the most powerful cards in the game. What I like the most about Ghost Ogre is its utility. It not only can be used to be able to help stop your opponent from making a board, but also is a card that can be used offensively. On your turn, if you draw it as your 6th card, it can be used to destroy your opponent's cards, which does come up a lot. For the graveyard cards, we're actually going to see a lot of movement. I'm gonna put Cycle Reader, ironically, in Sleeper alongside of DD Crow. Ghost Bell, in my opinion, is damn near a solid choice card, but I'm gonna put it in Sideworthy. Skullmeister is also a sleeper card, and the Bestials, you better bet yourself they are solid choices. Artifact Lancia has proven itself to be a reliable Sideworthy card, and I think Chaos Hunter, it's low-key copium. Before I start talking about the Bestials and Ghost Bell, these other cards can be simplified really fast. While we aren't in a format where Dimensional Shifter is important, graveyard movement is on the rise. Being able to stop Malice with Artifact Lancia is important. If you're going against a Light Fiend Yu-Gi-Oh deck, which puts tons of light cards in the graveyard, Cycle Reader is a little bit better and is searchable through Geargek and X. Not saying that it's the best card to be able to put in your arsenal, but it does have more uses than Copium. DD Crow and Skullmeister are incredibly solid right now. For the strategies that can't play Bestials, DD Crow is a decent alternative that can actually hit spells and traps, and Skullmeister, woo! This card is also searchable and stops graveyard effects. Now, both the Bestials and Ghost Bell go hand in hand. But let's talk about the Bestials. Bestial Druid's Worm is a perfect counter to Ryzeo. It can get rid of cards like Ryzeo Detonator and is really good against Fiendsmith. But Ghost Bell is an entirely different animal. Ghost Bell actually feels like Ghost Ogre. Not only can it stop the Fiendsmith cards and a host of other graveyard-reliant effects, if you are a deck that's weak to Bestials in itself, it's pretty freaking good. The graveyard movement cards are definitely showing themselves, but what about the summonable monsters? The summonable monsters consisting of the contact cards, which easily go here, not enough strategies to justify playing any of the C cards. Gamma is still technically a sleeper alongside of Delta because they actually do get rid of powerful cards in the meta. It's just going to be hard pressed to find slots to play these inside of your main board or your side deck Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is sideworthy. You should pretty much already know links are on the rise, so this card's really good at being able to facilitate your hand. And since targeting is still in abundance, this card's crazy. Swift Iron Scarecrow, Copium, Ghost Reaper, Copium, Gnome Material, Copium, and Seravis, Copium. A lot of people think that Ghost Reaper in Winter Cherries is really good because a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh strategies right now are extra deck reliant, and some of them are reliant on one card. But the big problem with Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is that there's been plenty of formats where Yu-Gi-Oh strategies were reliant on one extra deck card. Like when Ghost Reaper first came out, Burning Abyss was one of the top Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, and this was used against Burning Abyss. Not effectively though. The big problem with Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is that its restrictions are so problematic. By the time you can resolve this card, if your opponent is smart enough, they find another way to win the game. Yu-Gi-Oh isn't just made on one extra deck monster that you can silver bullet out of here. About 8 years of Yu-Gi-Oh has proved that Ghost Reaper is not the card. Now for your staple cards, it's a little bit different. Yu-Gi-Oh right now is hand trap heavy, but I think that there can be some really powerful board breaker and staple Yu-Gi-Oh cards that can get you there. In fact, there have actually been a few Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that have topped using a board breaker approach with little to no hand traps. Starting off with the back row removals, Cosmic Cyclone is situational, Lightning Storm sideworthy, Duster sideworthy, Twin Twister staple those divorce papers together. The reason why both Lightning Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster are strong is because Battle Roll is decently important. Lightning Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster can force Fiendsmith Desiree to use its effect at inopportune times, and it also allows you to be able to get rid of some important Rizio cards before your opponent can take advantage. These cards are pretty good what they do. In contrast, Cosmic Cyclone doesn't get rid of enough cards, and while Twin Twisters can get rid of multiple cards, oftentimes you want to reserve your resources as much as possible. Now, just like what we had with our effect negation cards, it gets a little bit different for the effect negations with staples. For the effect negation cards, Forbidden Droplet is a very good card. It'll probably remain a good card for the duration of its time simply because it not only allows you to break your opponent's board, but you can potentially win that game that turn. Forbidden Chalice, 100% situational. Dark Ruler No More, I want to say staple those divorce papers together, but there's an asterisk next to it. Black Goat That Laughs is situational, and Solemn Strike is actually a really good card. Let's go ahead and talk about why Dark Ruler No More is situational / staple those divorce papers together. Dark Ruler does what we want to do. Not only does it blank our opponent's entire Yu-Gi-Oh board, most of the time your opponent can't do anything to it, unless they have another card effect to activate in response to your Dark Ruler No More alongside a Fiendsmith Desiree, or playing Malice where Dark Ruler No More doesn't do anything until they've already established their board on your turn. And against Tenpai, I hope you're not siding this card against them. Dark Ruler No More does have the potential to be good, but not being able to inflict damage as well as being able to easily be played around right now is the huge thing. Solemn Strike and Forbidden Droplet, on the other hand, both provide two ways for your opponent to not being able to respond to it. Droplet basically saying this will go through if you send enough cards from your hand to the graveyard, and Solemn Strike being a counter trap. Solemn Strike is actually way better in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, not only because it can stop hand traps, it can also stop summons from the extra deck, and of course it can't really be countered. While the Black Goat Laughs and Forbidden Chalice need to be in certain decks that can take advantage of them. Now for the destructive staple cards, here's where we get a little tricky. Dino Wrestler Pankratops and Metaltronus are really good cards. Metaltronus is specifically for mirror match type decks, and Dino Wrestler Pankratops does a little bit more than trade 1-for-1. Oftentimes it can't be stopped, it forces your opponent in awkward situations like Cashier Fenrir, and this big guy has a 2600 body. At worst, the 1-for-1 trade pays for itself because it does put your opponent in weird situations. Evenly matched 100% sideworthy, and Ultimate Slayer is a good card. I think you can actually get away with playing Ultimate Slayer inside of your main deck. That card is so crazy. It is a little bit dependent on the strategy that you're playing, needing the extra deck space, but overall this card has been amazing. Super Polymerization is also the worst kept secret in the game. In Yu-Gi-Oh right now, there's actually quite a few combinations that Super Polymerization can hit. I will say though, the only drawback for Super Polymerization is that you better be playing a deck that can take advantage on Super Polymerization on its own. Decks like Branded, Chimera, even Invoked, if you were to go that route, need to be able to take advantage of super polymerization by itself, because you don't always have at least those two perfect monsters on your opponent's field. I would put both Raigeki and Harbinger in situational. The problem here is that oftentimes you don't want to send your opponent's cards to the graveyard, which is why cards like Ultimate Slayer and Evenly Matched have gained its role, and super polymerization just being versatile enough fits in. These cards are still really good, but have to be in dedicated spaces. Overall, the biggest reason why you don't want to send your opponent's cards into the graveyard is because both Yugioh and Malice have ways to bring them back or take advantage of them being in the graveyard. Gamseal, Divine Carnate Kirakara, and Alpha Master of the Beast are staple those divorce papers together. Unfortunately, these cards don't get rid of enough of your opponent's cards, or they use their effects where they may be a little bit too late to take advantage. Lava Golem and Sphere Mode are situational. Lava Golem is kind of crazy, but your deck needs to not need its normal summon. That limits so many strategies. Sphere Mode can get rid of a bigger board, but the problem with Sphere Mode is that it has the same requirements of Lava Golem, but also kind of hard to get rid of at times. The Kaiju cards aren't necessarily in disarray, they do have their uses, but they need to be played in specific Yu-Gi-Oh decks to be able to take full advantage. Which brings us to our quick plays and our take control cards. Book of Moon is staple those divorce papers together like. To be honest, I would say Book of Moon is probably high up there, because it does do what you're trying to do. It can get rid of cards like Ryzeal Detonator. The problem is that it can only hit one card. Book of Eclipse can hit all of your opponent's cards, main worthy. Not only does it not target, which means Fiendsmith's sequence doesn't have anything to do with it, it could potentially prevent your opponent from Exceed summoning on that turn. Another card that isn't on this list is Destructive Daruma Cannon. That card is also a main-worthy Yu-Gi-Oh card. It has similar properties to Book of Eclipse, but also can get rid of Link monsters, so it's pretty good against Malice. Enemy Controller is situational. It can be really good at taking your opponent's monsters, but losing your own monster in the process requires you to play a specific deck. Change of Heart is a really good card right now. If it isn't Fiendsmith Desiree, it can more than likely be targeted, taking control of, and if you are playing a similar deck, used to your advantage. Triple Tactics Talent and Triple Tactics Thrust are main-worthy Yu-Gi-Oh cards. There are 23 hand traps in the format, big dog. That means that these cards are almost always popping off, but it also means that Crossout Designator and Cold by the Grave are main-worthy as well. Lastly, Threatening Roar does stand for multiple cards here. I like to think of this Threatening Roar icon as those settable trap cards that you can get with Thrust at this moment. That means cards like Dimensional Barrier or Different Dimension Ground, Artifact Sanctum, or whatever wacky cards you can find that are silver bullets against some of the top decks. These are easily some of the best cards in the game, side-worthy. When your opponent is playing so many hand traps for Thrust to be able to get to whatever you want to end your opponent, they are must-plays inside of your side deck. But that's all that I have for these staples tier list, big dog. Big Money Maurice is going to be showing you what are the best hand traps one more time. Just a quick once over to show you what I think about them. And then he'll also even be showing you the staples, letting you know what are the most powerful staples. Again, big dog, this video doesn't tend to get a lot of views, but I'd really appreciate it if you guys commented down below and like the video. It would really help the algorithm, and maybe in the future, it will get more views. Until next time, big dog, make sure to check out this other video because it's crazy, as I'll catch you on the next one.